Hey guys, it's Alisha with Terradrift, and today we're going to talk about trekking poles, if you couldn't have guessed. Specifically, cheap versus expensive trekking poles. Is it worth the money, really, to buy the really expensive trekking poles as opposed to the cheap ones? Are they really that much better? Well, we kind of put them to the test over the weekend and tried to figure out what we liked or what we didn't like, and why you maybe want to spend more on expensive trekking poles versus cheap ones. So let's get into it. First of all, the trekking poles we kind of compared were the Black Diamond Distance Z and FLZ. So this is the Z, the Distance Z. It is a fixed length trekking pole, which means you have to buy it specifically for your height, which means you're probably not going to share it with anybody. It is the length that it is. It is not adjustable at all. This is just it. This one is 130 centimeters long, and it will always be 130 centimeters long. The FLZ, on the other hand, has one adjustment point, which means that you can adjust it up to about 20 centimeters. So a few inches, not quite a foot, obviously. You still have to buy it based on your height. Although, because there is an adjuster, there's a little wiggle room there. We compared them to this really cheap, fantastic model that we have used for years. It's from Walmart, not embarrassed to say it. We paid $17 for these trekking poles, and that was for the pair, not for a trekking pole. They are outdoor products, so they are like a cheap brand, no frills, no flash, not ultralight or anything like that. In comparison, the Z, the Distance Z, is about $100, and the FLZ, because it has that adjustment point, is about $140. So keep that in mind when we're doing this comparison. Now, the main things that are different from one pole to another here is size and weight. The cheap trekking pole is obviously going to be heavier. They're all made from aluminum, but this is a heavier duty aluminum. It's thicker, it's heavier, it's sturdier. It weighs about 25 ounces. The Z, in comparison, weighs only 14 ounces, so it's much lighter. You can tell it just from picking it up that it weighs a lot less. The FLZ is 16 ounces. So you're adding a few ounces for that little adjustment point there, which is really important, but also apparently costs $40. As far as size goes, the cheapo version only goes down to 63 centimeters. This is just about as short as it gets. So obviously it's quite a bit longer than the other models. But it does extend to 131 centimeters, so it still gets nice and long for the taller individuals among us. Not me. The Z folds down to 43 centimeters, so that's a nice compact size right there. And then of course extends to the 131, or whatever size that you have to order for your height. The FLZ is even smaller because it has that little collapsible adjustment point there. So it's only 40 centimeters long when it's shrunken down, which is about 16 inches as opposed to the Z's 17 inches. The differences in size and weight are pretty obvious. What's not as obvious is why you'd want one over the other. Basically, it comes down to materials and durability. Say, if you want an even lighter trekking pole though, you could go with carbon fiber. There are a few carbon fiber poles on the market, but the thing about carbon fiber is that if you scratch it or gouge it at all, you've immediately damaged the structural integrity of the pole, which means that if you put pressure on it the wrong way, knock it against a rock the wrong direction or something, it could just snap, and then you have no trekking pole. So that's not really very beneficial. I personally would not ever choose a carbon fiber trekking pole for that reason. It's a little bit similar when it comes to aluminum. Obviously, the cheap trekking pole, this thicker, heavier aluminum frame is gonna be more durable and last a little longer. I'm gonna be honest, I have never broken a trekking pole in my life, ever, because I buy the cheap ones and they don't just break, which is awesome because I hate spending money on new gear. It just feels so wasteful. Whereas these guys, Hopefully they'll last you quite a few years, but I have heard plenty of stories about trekking poles breaking on the trail. It does happen because, you know, you're putting a lot of pressure on them, you're demanding a lot of your trekking poles, putting a lot of weight on them as you push yourself up the mountain or coming back down. So they do break, and the thinner and the lighter the material, the more likely that is to happen sooner rather than later. So keep that in mind when you're spending money on trekking poles. Yeah, it may be lighter and pack down smaller and be sleeker, but it might also last half the amount of time that a heavier, maybe clunkier trekking pole is going to. So basically, what we kind of decided after using these different poles for a weekend is that personally, we wouldn't spend our money on the more expensive trekking poles. Yeah, they're nice, they pack down small, they're light, but most of the time our trekking poles, if we have them with us, are in our hands. So we're not too concerned about the weight of them in our packs, which just makes it not a big deal. Also, how much is an ounce or two worth to you? Is it worth $100? Is it worth $50 to shed, you know, half a pound between a pair of trekking poles? That's obviously up to you. We're cheap. We don't like to spend money on things that we don't need. I also like to know that my gear can take a little bit of abuse. So I'm okay going with a heavier trekking pole that I don't have to worry about so much if I'm gonna toss it on the ground by the tent or drop it down a boulder field, which I'm pretty sure has happened before. The only time I could actually see an argument for paying more for these expensive trekking poles is if you are traveling with them a lot or going on very long excursions like doing the PCT or the Appalachian Trail or something like that, where you may actually go for long stretches of trail with no hills, and you're not going to want the trekking poles in your hand. You want to stash them, you want them to be light, you don't even want to think about them being there, or you're traveling with them, like I said, and you're only traveling with a day pack, and you need them to fit in a small space. If you do that a lot, it might be worth it to pay a little extra for some expensive trekking poles. But otherwise, honestly, I would go with the cheap ones. So there you have it. Are expensive trekking poles worth the extra cash? My opinion, not usually. So save your money and use it on, I don't know, something cooler, like an ultralight tent or a pair of hiking boots. What do you think? Are expensive trekking poles worth the money? Share your trekking pole experiences with us in the comments below. We'd love to hear a good trail story. We'll put a link to all the poles in the description below so you can check them out for yourself if you like. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and hit subscribe. Wander on.